Supongo que lo emiten en Twitch, ¿no? Sí. Lo siento, pero... ¿Dejo categoría esta? Están empezando ya. Ahora os lo capturo.
We've got announcements from Warhammer Age of Sigmar, Warhammer 40,000, Warcry, Warhammer Underworlds, Warhammer the Old World, Kill Team, and loads more.
Viene de todo. Ahora lo pondré en categoría Warhammer, tío. ¿Qué tipo de destino? Yo creo que lo van a dejar como algo separado. No van a dejar como modo separado free to play, casi seguro. Pongo categoría Warhammer, luego volvemos a WoW. A ver, justo ya hemos llegado para la primera reveal. Espérate, me he hecho esta. Me entró una taza también. Aparentemente caos, ¿eh? Efectivamente. Effective Wonder. Me alegra que sea caos porque probablemente no lo voy a comprar y así por fin tengo algo que digo, vale, esto no lo voy a comprar. Están chulos. Chaos Lord with Jump Back. Hostias. Nazgul. Los cultistas no son los mismos de antes. No, esos son los de Kill Team, ¿no? Tío, qué chulos estaban los del Jump Pack. O sea, los del retroreactor. El señor del caos está muy esbelto también. Uf, los termis. Los poseídos nuevos están guapísimos. Los elegidos están chulos. Pero están chulos, ¿sabes? Para verlos desde fuera. Esto es algo que no voy a comprar, lo cual me agrada muchísimo. Oh, pero cómo mola su camiseta, cabrón. El códex de los espaciales, tío, antiguo. Eso no lo tengo. Qué bajito está el volumen, tío. No puedo subirlo más que esto. Esto es lo máximo. Hostia, es Chris Metzen, míralo. No, yo creo que lo pondrán free to play. O sea, ahora solo se podrá jugar con suscripción. Ahora. Se parece a Chris Metzen, tío. Un poco más joven. Hasta habla del rollo, tiene la misma entonación ahí. Wow. ¿Dos Battle Forces para el caos sacan? Uf. ¿Qué sois, Pokémon, tío? Hostia, eso está feo, eh. Se ha rayado. Acá la F5. Pero no los silencios.
To finally try and get closer to overthrowing the rule of terror. His planetary engine, the Wormwood, is back in real space.
No sé si streaman en YouTube. Me mola mucho la habitación donde están, Me gustaría tener una así. La podría montar. Como mola esa habitación, tío.
Do you want to play like that, the Alpha Legion style, which is all infiltrating and sneaking up on people? Whichever your style is, there's a way to play now.
That's fantastic. So whichever army you've got, you can sort of switch between detachments and play the way you want to play. That's cool.
Yeah, an entire army of expendable cultists sounds awesome. There is an entire army.
Sí, un ejército cultista sería la polla.
Traitor Guardsmen as well.
Traitor Guardsmen, yeah. There's also others, as Josh said, that kind of
Coño, la puta legión negra de toda la vida. Los míos lo que sí tienen highlight en azul, así que parecen un poco más coloridos. Pero es que tengo legión negra, y voy a tener más.
But if you want to play a Night Lord Siege Force, knock yourself out.
Any word bearers in that book, guys?
There are word bearers in that book.
Had to be somewhere, didn't there?
There are, yeah.
They always sneak in there.
They do, and that detachment that is really focused on the one from the Index really leans into their kind of pacts with the different Chaos Gods and the different marks. So that one's a great way to represent your word bearers.
Cool. Can Chaos Space Marine players still make dark pacts with the gods?
Yes, they can, yeah. And that's all the detachments still can. So it is,
me alegro que el próximo focus de Codex sea uno que no me interese, porque ya tengo orcos y estos, tío, como se llamen. Eso no me mola tanto.
We really wanted to make sure that the whole Chaos Space Marine army has a very different feel to the Loyalist Marine armies. You know, fundamentally, they're all like big, dudes in power armor, right? So how do we make those things feel differently? Really leaning in from the Chaos Space
Creo que
Marines to
agua
the
también.
fact that they
Lo que
are
bravo.
powered by the Dark Gods. They make those pacts, both from a rules
Que
point of view.
necrones
also,
ahora.
the miniatures themselves,
Orcos ahora en cualquier momento, ¿no? Bueno, los
Space
orcos
Marines that have gone evil. They're
estaban
corrupted
presentados
by
ya,
the
sí,
warp
¿no?
and fused with the dark powers. So we really want to do that across everything. The
Oh, no.
artwork,
Sí,
the
¿no?
rules,
Sí.
the background sections, photography, really trying to capture the dark glory of chaos.
That's brilliant.
No, los templarios negros son bastante más hardcore que estos capullos del caos.
So going back to the two battle forces we've got, so the Dread Talons really appeal to me because I have a penchant for close combat, I think it's fair to say. So tell me about that set.
Y si les gusta el combate cuerpo a cuerpo llevando una camiseta de lobos espaciales, vaya.
You've got the new Jump Pack Lord with his Raptor Bodyguard. You've also got the Demon Prints in there. You can build that as a Wing Demon Print. So again, super fast, super fighty. And then the rest of that box is rounded out by a Cultist Horde.
Los cultistas molan un montón, joder, siempre me han gustado los cultistas.
cultistas.
Le regalé un huevo de cultistas a Sigrid.
So yeah, great box for
I
you.
like an expendable core for my army. That's great.
You see, I think I'm a bit more tactical than that. So the Veterans of the Long War box would appeal more to me. It's more of an archetypal Chaos Space Marine force, right?
Yeah, so
La última partida que eché con CSM me los han barrido de una manera. Está en YouTube. Es que eran antes del Codex. Tenía una herida, tío.
They're not quite as fast, so you probably
Era muy basura.
a little bit of time getting there, but you don't die anywhere as quickly, sir.
Drop them into the heart of the enemy and slaughter them wholesale.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So either one, very different playstyles, but you can enjoy them both. So.
Esto es un formato de Adepticon mucho mejor que el año pasado, me gusta más.
So there we go. We've got two exciting new battle forces coming up very shortly for you guys. Stu, Josh, it's been an absolute pleasure talking about those. Thank you so much.
Pero no enseñan las Battle
What a way
Forces.
to start, and that's not the only thing from the 41st millennium we've got to show you. So don't go anywhere, 40k fans, there's plenty more where that came from. Next up, we're travelling deep within the mortal realms.
¿Age of Sigmar? O Underworlds. Warcry, Ay, aún no hemos jugado Warcry. Compré la primera caja el día 1 que salió. Bueno, Bone Reapers contra los tontos estos elfos. Técnicamente es Sigmar, pero... De Warcry me arrepiento un poco de haber comprado la caja, la verdad. No hemos aprovechado una mierda.
So there we go. Warcry, Briar and Bone is on the way real soon. You can almost smell it on the air. My name's Nick, and joining me is John from the Warhammer Studio.
Oh.
John, Warcry, Briar and Bone.
El pinta metalero tiene este chaval, tú.
Okay, so very, very exciting box set. We've got brand new bespoke warbands, both the Ossiarch Reapers and the Sylvaneth. In addition to which, we've got the Ravening Narwhal, which is a giant, horrible creature. It's really, really cool. It's a really, really nasty, horrible piece of terrain, which we'll get to in a little bit. So the Tyrannic cohort are a bit of an oddball one for the Ossiarch Bone Reapers because they're effectively exiled constructs. So the thing is with the Ossiarch Bone Reapers is very, very little goes to waste. Okay, everything is built.
Pero
for
Gandalf,
purpose.
Gandalf no sé.
Sometimes the
Parece
purpose
más
is
Saruman.
constant.
Iba a
So
decir
each of the
el
creatures in the
el blanco no,
Tyrannic
¿vale?
cohort, in addition to the-
Este es Saruman el anti-blanco.
are creatures who
digamos.
are being punished by the Ossiarch Bone Reaper for some kind of perceived failure. So, you know,
Son
we all
quiletos
know
de
that
verdad.
The Ossiarch Bone Reapers, never flee, never retreat, win all the battles all the time. Well, that's just patently not true. Okay, every now and again, something doesn't go quite
Definitely
right.
in my case, yeah.
And either it's somebody's fault, at which point you're to blame, or, today it's your fault, so you're to blame. So what you end up with is a group of very fast, very mobile outriders. And part of the exile...
El sombrero de marina que tiene.
Okay, so these creatures get sent out into the very, very outer wilds of the various different mortal realms. And in this instance, this particular warband has ended up in the Narwood, because no one really wants to go in there. And the Ossiarch Bone Reapers are already...
Déjate ya de Warcry, que
because
no,
of the
iba diciendo no le interesa a nadie,
vast
tiene sus
bone
fans.
that they'll be made from. And these are no exception. So they're crazed, ferocious, feral, but they've also got a certain element of clinical, death-like emotionless about them as well. So they're a warband of paradoxes. It's very, very cool.
And the models are fantastic.
The models are very, very cool. Have you noticed the single eye?
Oh, yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So that's effectively
Un película de necrones de fantasía, tío.
It's not Catacross himself specifically looking through them, but their masters can just see
La
through
estética
their
de
eyes.
AOS me gusta en general menos que la de
So,
Warhammer
so
clásico, tío.
Centroid
O
is
sea,
in charge of all this.
que es como muy
And it's
sobrecargado,
to
muy
keep
exagerado
everything
todo.
in line and make sure
Los Stormcast
everything's in the
aún
right place
vale.
and get things going where they're supposed to be.
Pero es que incluso los orcos de Age of Sigmar no me gustan tanto. Los nuevos, los de tercera estaban bien. Nuevos. Tiene años ya. Que son del 20, del 21. Del 21 creo que son, no me acuerdo. Pero es que, no sé, tú piensas en enanos del fantasy, mola. Enanos de Age of Sigmar. Espero que los Skaven no sean demasiado sobrecargados, tío. El propio Sigmar. Yo es que estos también, no sé. Por ejemplo, en fantasy los elfos silvanos eran simplemente elfos con arcos y muy estética de bosque, ¿no? Lo que la caja esta, a lo que se enfrentan es el análogo elfos silvanos de AOS. O sea, tú hablas de elfos silvanos, piensas en Legolas, ¿no? Aquí los Sylvaneth son lo que te va a enseñar ahora. O sea, de verdad. Míralo. Prefiero Legolas, tío. Me hace cierta ilusión tener un ejército de elfos rollo Legolas. No me hace ninguna ilusión tener un ejército de arbolitos raros ahí. Me gusta más la fantasía básica del Warhammer original.
And the danger is there that you get cut off from the Song of Life completely and you end up with this horrible warped, twisted creature. And no one really knows what happens there. But what the Swarm Sage is effectively doing is easing out the corruption. Because corruption's like, you can see it on the models themselves. And the Swarm Sage uses its little crazy swarm stuff.
Y tengo de estos por ahí, de alguna colección de estas de Mortal Realms o algo. Van a venir más en Dawnbringers, tengo entendido.
But there's power in that, because once the corruption's torn out of you, you become more energized and you're able to hear that Song of Life a little bit better. The warband itself functions around the leader, dealing damage to your fighters.
Eso es esculpido en enjambre de abejas que sale del panal, tío. Está curioso. Qué coñazo será eso de pintar, tío. Menos mal que no me interesa hacerlo.
But at the same time, you need to manage your fighters who are quite fragile very, very carefully, otherwise they'll fall over dead by the time you boosted them up.
Is it more difficult than it sounds, or is it about as difficult as it sounds?
It's not terribly difficult, because the damage that she deals to your fighters is locked behind abilities. So you need to have the abilities in order to be able to do it.
Okay.
So most of the time you're like, I've got my status, I've got my fighting stats, just like a regular game of Warcry.
Eso compensarse cuando quedará bien. Las alas de cada abejita estaban pintadas a mano. No, sí, las minis estas son famosas por su fragilidad. Macho, tengo unas minis del ejército de espectros, los Nighthound, que son como un montón de almas. Es una peana grande, pero es un montón de almas entrelazadas entre ellas. Y lo que son varios trozos de plástico que cada una es un alma con una cola muy larga. Y tienes que pegarlas de manera muy específica para que estén entrelazadas entre ellas, ¿no? Como una especie de enjambre de almas. Esa mierda, con mirarla, se rompe en trocitos. ¡Qué horror, tío! Está sujeto la peana por una de las colitas de las almas. Y es que lo tocas un poco y todas las almas hacen y se caen. ¡Oh, qué horror de kit, tío! ¡Cómo lo odio! Son muy buenas en reglas, que es lo que jode, te renta llevarlas. Pero son horribles. La caja de AOS 4 yo creo que va a caer porque nos interesaría hacer vídeos de tutoriales de cómo jugar y todo eso. Que a la gente este juego le gusta mucho. Es un buen juego, es divertido. Prefiero Fantasy, prefiero 40k, pero AOS merece existir hoy en día. Habrá que ver si Sidri quiere las ratas, porque a mí me gustan, pero realmente no las quiero.
It's an awful place.
It's horrific. Now, these things are terrifying, and the Gnarlwood is full of them. And of course, the Gnarlwood is also full of just people who live there or around it. And every now and again, they get it into their heads that maybe they can kind of half tame one of these things. That's impossible. It's laughable.
La pieza de escenografía nunca me he fijado en lo que dices.
Generally a very bad idea. So what they do is they kind of tie its roots down a bit to make sure it doesn't move off too much or eat them in their sleep, okay? And then they make like a little sacrificial altar out of it. And when a Gnarloak doesn't really need to go anywhere to feed, it kind of turns into one of these things. It's one of the many different creatures this thing can spawn out of, because obviously the magic in the realm can twist things in all kinds of horrible manners. So effectively what people will do is they'll go, okay, as long as we feed you, could you just scare off all the other Gnarlooks and maybe eat whatever isn't us?
Están dándole mucho bombo al puto Warcry, tío. Llevamos 10 minutos hablando de Warcry. Es posible que ni presentan nada más de 40k, ¿sabes? O sea, 40k enseñamos 4 mierdas de caos. Y ahora venga, 10 minutos de Warcry aquí hablando de, wow, mira, los árboles son muy árboles, tío, están chulos. Supongo que cerrarán con AOS 4. Me imagino que enseñarán alguna mierda de Blood Bowl, Underworld, Kill Team. De Old World se especulaba enanos, ¿no? No, dijeron que próximamente se podrá ver más de
Thank you so
caos.
much for talking to us about Warcry, Briar, and Bone. Thank you guys too, but stay around, there's more on the way.
Los Tau. No lo sé. ¿Los Tau caben en esta conferencia? Esto es Underworlds. No, no caigas tú también en Blood Bowl. No, mientras no caigas en Underworlds, que dicen que es un poco kick. Es miniatura rarísima. Tienen que tener un presupuesto para diseñar miniaturas nuevas, macho, porque cada 3 meses presentan 40 cajas nuevas. Todo esto cuesta dinero, ¿sabes? No digo comprarlo, diseñarlo, joder, y cuesta mucho dinero. Son kits hiper detallados, o sea, me da la calidad de eso, porque son miniaturas así de pequeño. Pero tiene una de detalle. Menos mal que no estoy enganchado a esto, porque no paran de sacar producto nuevo.
So there we go, the new Warhammer Underworlds box is just over the horizon. My name's Nick, and I've got John with me from the Warhammer studio to talk all about it. John, good to have you
Este
here.
formato de presentación es mucho mejor que el que tenía antes. Me alegra que hayan evolucionado un poco ahí.
Story of Deathgorge. So Deathgorge was a large ravine, and now what happened is we've gone beneath that again to even deeper underworlds.
It's even colder down
under
here.
the underworlds. Yeah, it's absolutely awful down there. No one's having any fun. It is a miserable, horrible, cold, frigid place to be. There are horrible giant worms trying to eat you alive. There are horrible parasites crawling in the dark, trying to eat your brain and drink your soul. It's just terrible. And obviously we've got these poor unfortunates here who are right bang in the middle of it.
They've not even wrapped up warm. Look at
No,
them.
not even. They've got faith and absolute craziness to keep them warm. So their delusions are keeping them well toasty.
So, of course, it's the new season box. It's
Yep.
perfect place to start playing the game, of course.
Unquestionably.
And also great for people who already play the game as well.
De lo que me
Absolutely, yeah. So there's something here for everybody. If you're a current
Es que es
fan
el
of
único puto
Underworlds,
capullo de la empresa que juega estas mierdas.
stack of rivals
No
down
creo,
there
no,
as
pero
well. Loads of different
será
playstyles,
especialista en
loads of
juegos de
cool mechanics to
especialista.
play with. And if you're brand
¿Dónde
new to the
está
game,
mi segunda
again,
edición de
perfect, you've got
Battlefield
anything,
Gothic?
play the game, you got your rulebook,
¿De Legions
you've got
Imperiales enseñan
warbands, you
algo?
can
No
play
creo,
with
¿no?
somebody else. They don't even need to get their own box set. You can just play both the same one. And they've all got rivals decks. So there's plenty of like
Me haría ilusión.
playability in there
El otro
as
día
well.
tuve en mis manos
Rivals
una
decks
caja
around, you can
de
Nemesis,
Solar
you can
Auxilia de
play
Legions
with
Imperiales, de los refuerzos estos
loads to get stuck
pesados.
into.
Now we've got to
Y los
talk about
marcadores
these
nuevos,
boxes,
tío.
because they are just
Ay,
brilliant. There's two
unas
brand
ganas de
new
llevarme la
warbands in
casa.
here.
Pero es que no he montado aún la caja base, no,
So
no
where
tiene
to
sentido
start?
que
Should I
compre
start
más.
with the delusional Flesh Eater Courts, or the arguably just as delusional Brethren of the Bolt?
We'll start with the slightly more delusional ones.
Slightly more delusional ones. All right,
Yeah.
so we'll go for the Flesh Eater Courts. So this particular warband, their whole shtick is walking up to enemy fighters and whacking lumps off them with their massive cleavers and chains and hooks and all the rest, and preparing the meat in the perfect way to serve their lord. And they're broadly speaking an aggro-style
chulos.
warbands. What that means for people who don't understand the term is they're all about getting stuck up in your face and shanking you with all the horrible rusty cleavers and spikes that they've got attached.
Sí, estas se montan y se
The way this
pintan.
warband functions is very different.
De estas,
is that
yo
there's no encouragement.
tengo
People
unas
don't
cuantas
back
bandas
much
de
life.
estas, porque las
So
colecciones estas
ordinarily what happens
semanales.
is as soon as you
Lo
kill
bueno
them,
de estas
they
minis
go
es que son
and
utilizables en el
people
juego de
all
Age of Sigmar
very,
normal.
very highly
Eso
trained
mola un
ships,
montón,
they're
en
the
realidad.
absolute peak of
Porque
their
podrían no
art.
haberlo hecho.
So they're not
Pero
very
como son las
good.
mismas
And as
facciones,
a
normalmente
result,
sacan reglas
you
para estas
get
para el juego base.
what you start with.
Y como hacen
Okay, so that's
colecciones de estas
disgusting,
semanales,
but on the other
muchas
side,
veces, como ya tienen una
we've got
cajita de estas que es
Brethren of the
relativamente
Bolt,
pequeña, ¿no?
right?
Porque tienen a lo mejor
Okay,
5 o
so
6
Brethren of
minis,
the Bolt are,
lo que te hacen es rellenar la
Warhammer
colección
Sigmar
con
faction,
bandas de
broadly
estas,
speaking,
porque las
all
puedes
human.
usar de todas formas. Así que acabé con unas cuantas bandas en realidad.
And they are effectively the worshippers of Sigmar.
Normalmente
They're
diferencias
crazy
una miniatura de una
flags
banda
and things.
de
They have
Underworlds
very, very
de una miniatura de Age of
alike
Sigmar,
in the sense that
porque
they all
todas
have
estas
some
tienen
ship
peana escénica.
performed struck by
Y
lightning.
las
Some of them believe
de Age of
that
Sigmar
they were
no, tienen
intentionally
peana
struck
plana.
by Sigmar's divine lightning. Some of them were just hitting the head really hard.
Que tú ya la
They've
decoras
all
como
got
quieras,
some
pero
kind of
si
interaction
ves que hay
with,
ladrillos y cosas así
auxiliary
en la peana, es que
heavy
normalmente es de
divine
Underworld.
lightning in some way, shape, or form. And they do a couple of unique things. There's two really big ones that I'd like to touch on in the time we've got, which is that the first one is they all start inspired, because they start with this kind of etheric charge attached to them. Every time they blast you with their divine tasers, what happens is all that charge
Divine
goes out of them,
tasers. Me gusta
reaches
eso.
over in front of you, and then all the lightning goes away.
Es que hacen
At
hasta
which point
concept
they
art
give you
para
a
cada una de
charge.
estas
So what
cajas, tío.
happens
Mira
is,
cómo
as you
queda.
fight through, you can fight through your fighters. So which can increase the range of your melee attack actions,
No,
which is really good.
una de las
So
cosas,
you
una de las
can
cosas
never
más
really
chulas de
fight
Warhammer
safe
es que
as
no
the
suelen
attacker.
dejar,
You're
no suelen, a
very
veces lo
very
hacen,
effectively, whenever
pero
you
no suelen
chase
dejar
an
flagrantemente
enemy
obsoleto
through
algo.
friends,
O sea, la última partida que yo he jugado, contra Morgana de hecho, he usado miniaturas que yo he comprado en 2002. Y siguen siendo utilizables hoy en día. Y eso me mola un montón. Porque no hay tanto FOMO, ¿sabes? No te compras una mini y dices, hostia, la tengo que usar ya porque en 20 años... Bueno, en muchos juegos ni siquiera es en 20 años, ¿sabes? En 2 años será inválido. No, pues aquí en 22 años sigue siendo válido. No todas, por supuesto, no siempre. Pero bastantes sí. Un gusano de Dune, tío.
Now, there's a second Rivals deck in there as well called the Hungering Parasite deck, which is really unique, isn't it? How does it work?
Okay, so the Hungering Parasite is a tiny little fragment of the God Beast Krakatoa, which is this horrible big amorphous glob goo thing. And this tiny little fragment is frozen off and broken. So it's this tiny little bit of a god beast that's scuttling around. And effectively, it's just this frozen chunk. And then whenever something living gets near it, it thaws just enough to just latch onto it. The deck is designed towards, it's a really control-style deck. You've got to manipulate the position of either the fighter with the parasite.
Tienen vintage. Tengo alguna miniatura que se considera vintage. Coño, tengo marines espaciales de segunda edición, por ejemplo.
It's easier said than done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds it.
Because obviously your fighter's uninspired.
Yo los saqué el otro día, los tenía ahí al fondo de la estantería. Técnicamente tengo vehículos orcos de bueno, 2.5 edición de Gorka Morka. El buggy de Gorka Morka, tío, las motos, el camión.
John, thank you so much for coming to talk to us about Warhammer Underworlds.
Coño, a ver, toda la colección de Altaya supongo que es vintage hoy en día porque son minis de Fantasy Quinta.
Some fantastic releases there.
Sí, son todos así.
The only announcement we'll have for Warhammer Age of Sigmar.
Muy estáticos y muy gordos, tío.
What can it be? I hear you cry. Well, more on that.
Tenían su gracia. El otro día sacando cosas antiguas para enseñárselas a Morgana, tío, estaba en plan, tío, tiene su gracia el Warhammer antiguo. Lo veo y digo, es que, no sé, hasta los marines antiguos me gustan más que los nuevos. Minis de metal, las siguen vendiendo en Fantasy, en Old World. Pero en general, las de 40k son todas vintage técnicamente. A ver, es que muchas de las que antes eran metal las convirtieron en Forgeable, te iba a decir. En Finecast. Y algunas en plástico. Hay muchas minis que antes eran de metal siempre, porque no podían hacer esa calidad en plástico, que hoy en día puedes comprar en plástico. O como mínimo en resina.
What a miniature Abraxia, Spear of the Everchosen. We are joined here by Matt and Phil from the Warhammer Studio, guys. Pleasure to have you with us to talk about this great new miniature. Phil, I'll start with you. Abraxia, who is she?
She is none other than the right-hand woman of Archaon Everchosen. This woman is in control
Mano
of the
derecha de Archaon.
Varangard. That is no small feat because, of course, every member of the Varangard is a Chaos Lord or above. And so she has essentially got incredible martial power.
No, a ver, es un vídeo pregrabado, esto no está en directo. Se nota un huevo.
Of hope that Sigmar has established there. Now, she has a spear, Gorbolgo, which is like essentially a mutating spear. Anything touched by that will turn into an awful chaos spawn. It will also mutate her unless she keeps the range, unless she keeps her concentration.
No, tampoco eran oro de miniaturas.
Concentration horn screw out of her head.
Ni siquiera valían más realmente, o sea... Mucha gente los odiaba, sobre todo, por ejemplo, en el Señor de los Anillos tenías un montón de mierda en plástico, ¿no? Y tenías los héroes en metal normalmente, pero eso estaban bien. Luego te comprabas el troll de las cavernas en metal. ¿Alguien de aquí es viejo del hobby? ¿Alguien recuerda el troll de las cavernas en metal, tío? Era un blob de metal así, con un brazo que por mucho superglue que le echaras, esa mierda no se pegaba. Tenías que hacerle un puto agujero con un taladro y meterle un alambre que conectara dos piezas y pegar eso. La pintura podía saltar la primera también, si se cae tiene más posibilidad de corromperse. Yo aquí en la mesa ahora mismo tengo una de metal, tengo a Lutz, que es el icono del canal de Warhammer, de hecho. Este es de metal y se nota, pesa bastante más. Este, por ejemplo, aguantó corosiones la pintura, pero también porque no vio mucho uso en mesa. Está más para decorar. Esa miniatura era una miniatura que siempre quise de pequeño no la tenía. Lucas, bienvenido. Estamos viendo el evento de Warhammer. Están presentando cosas nuevas. La de Adepticon. Vamos a hacer, por cierto, aquí en el canal de Warhammer de YouTube, vamos a hacer también un Patreon, donde si os apuntáis podréis entrar en sorteos de cajas mensuales. Tengo que dedicar unos días para investigar precios y tal, pero quiero hacer eso también en el canal de Warhammer. El canal principal, si os suscribís al Patreon, participáis en sorteos de juegos digitales. ¿Ves? a lo que se enfrenta la pava esta, a los estos de Ciudad de Sigmar. Esas minis me molan. Esas estoy a punto de comprarlas, pero demasiado Warhammer.
You can also take Abraxia with Battle Line Varangard in her Army of Renown featured in the book. And that gives you a whole new host of tricks to build and play with an army that is one of the most elite armies, if not the most elite armies, in all of Age of Sigmar, really focusing in on the Varangard and their power.
That sounds absolutely terrifying.
I'm going to get painted straight away.
You'd probably expect nothing less from Archeon's Left Television.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us, Matt. Phil, if you don't mind hanging around, we've got more with you very shortly. So hang around, folks. We've got more to come.
A ver, algo importante de verdad.
Of the Dawnbringers story arc, we've seen two crusades, the twin-tailed crusade we call it, head out from Hammerhal Aksha, and Hammerhal Gairan, and they have had so many trials and tribulations.
No sé vosotros, pero estoy esperando los anuncios tochos.
We've seen them rise and fall,
Dios, miniatura más sobrecargada. Joder. Que ahora que hace poco monté los de Bretonia de Old World, son miniaturas tan simples, tan esbeltas por eso también, porque son simplonas. Y ves las ciudades de Sigmar en comparación, tío, que está hiper sobrecargado todo. Cada miniatura, incluso la más pleb, tiene 300.000 filigranas y detalles y no sé qué. Dicen que son un horror de pintar por tanta superficie diferente. Joder, es que compara esto al caballero bretoniano. Dios.
They've basically had a horrible time of it trying to get up north to found their own city called Verdigris. Verdigris is looking like maybe that's going to work out, but we'll
molan mucho, estos me gustan un montón. Este tipo de fantasía me mola. Parece más plebs, ¿sabes? Empatizo más con ellos. Porque tú ves algo así ya de caos tan petado de detalle y casi me cuesta percibir que es peligroso siquiera, porque parece tan irreal. Tú ves un orco gigante subido a un mega jabalí y dices, hostia puta. Pero cuando ves a esta persona ahí con un... Es fantasy. Sí. Si quieres que te linchen, puedes decir que esto es fantasy. En el arte queda mejor, queda más simplona.
That did happen once in Abraxia's history, and that's why she has those horns. It only took a momentary lapse.
Me hace gracia que la personaje esta existía en el lore antes. Se llama Abraxia. Antes robase un demonio que se llama reacción. Existía de hace décadas el chaval. Me han copiado. Otra vez.
She cannot afford to fail. So we talked a bit about Abraxia right at the top end, the higher echelons of the chaos.
No, esta gente no usa IA. No usa ni aerógrafo para pintar las minis.
Tribesmen, basic people like you and I who are trying to get by out in the wilderness, and the Dark Oath exemplify that.
Estas
make
molan.
bargains with the dark powers to try and survive, and Gunnar Brand and his family are a great example of that. So Gunnar Brand himself is not just a
Estos me
big
molan.
fighter, he's
Más
also very
simplones,
powerful
¿ves?
in combat, but he's also kind of the brains of the operation. He's a very clever dude. And he doesn't really want to see his family slide into
No, el arte
chaos.
digital se va haciendo
Neither
décadas.
does he want to particularly kowtow to Sigmar. He, like all Dark Oath, he's got a massive chip on his shoulder about the fact that Sigmar basically bailed on them, and they had to resort to these dark methods to survive. He's got his daughter Singri with him, a sort of expert horse archer.
Xbox Horse Archer? ¿Qué?
The War Queen. Now, unfortunately, it's not that simple if you're enthralled to chaos. He starts
el
getting
arquero
involved
caballero de la
in
Xbox.
Archeon's grand plan and the pawns that are moving around the board, and some hidden forces that are lurking in the shadows that are also effectively using the Dark Oath as pawns. So running parallel to this story, we also see some old friends, Vandus Hammerhand and Korgos Kol, the mighty lord of
Son
Khorne,
Stormcast de los
his
antiguos.
nemesis.
Ahí creo que he visto
Now,
un
these characters
Liberator.
we brought into play at the beginning of the Realmgate Wars, many years ago.
El paladín de la Xbox contra el señor oscuro PlayStation 5.
Essentially a small vendetta into an
Creo que tengo este.
passion for Vandus Hammerhand.
Se los-
All he wants
bueno,
is to get his revenge on Kull. Kull killed his sons in a former life, way back when he was mortal, and he is definitely obsessing about it now. It's kind of bringing things off kilter and actually maybe splitting the crusade and splitting the loyalties of the people that should be united in the face of chaos to pursue his own agenda. Now, Korgos Kull, all he needs to turn into a demon prince is that last skull to cap his pyramid, to the real capstone to what he's been working on all these years. And so he has his own agenda, and it doesn't go the way you think it might. So I'm looking forward to people seeing how that story.
Me gusta que hablen con tanta pasión del lore, tío. Aunque a mí personalmente no me importa mucho el lore de Age of Sigmar, pero se nota que hay cariño detrás hoy en día.
We've seen destruction in the driving seat. We see that come to an end in Dawnbringers, but we also see the beginning of a new era. And there are signs for those who are paying attention of what that might be and where that might lead. On a personal level as well. So Vandus is a good example of that. He is not his former self, and his journey, he's almost exemplary of what the Stormcast have to deal with as they die and are reforged and die and are reforged.
No se abrieron con 40k, nos enseñaron Chaos Manes también.
His journey leads is really interesting, and we'll open a new chapter of the story as a result of that. So one of the great things about the Dawnbringers series is we've seen people
sobre un
on the
dragón.
ground story.
¿Dónde está Soap?
Throughout that, there have been little happenstances and agendas and clashes.
Hostia, tengo un slider, está viendo cómo han grabado esta toma. Es un slider, tío. Tengo un slider, tengo que sacarlo. Esa mierda era muy buena para grabar algunas tomas.
Demigods are not keen on showing their hand until the last minute, and it ends with this great climactic explosion of violence. Of course it does, it's Warhammer, and the Mortal Realms will never be the same again.
¿Cómo no? Los inmortales nunca serán lo mismo.
So that was a fantastic video showing off Dawnbringers 6. Here with me is Phil. Thank you for joining me.
No problem.
So we've seen the twin-tailed crusade set off from Hammerhall Aksha and Hammerhall Gyra. They faced an awful lot of trouble getting to where they are.
That's fair.
Can you sort of summarize what the Dawnbringer story has brought us so far?
Yeah, so we've seen two crusades, and by crusades, these are definitely the largest that the Sigmarite cities have put out yet. Statement of intent, really. Sigmar has to put his flag in the sand and say, everything's going fine, by the way, and we're definitely founding these cities. More of a
Ya, eso estoy pensando. Esto es simplemente resumir lo que acaban de ver.
But unfortunately, as is the way of Warhammer and the way of the Mortal Realms, it has not gone smoothly. We know that one city will rise.
¿Están haciendo tiempo? Soy yo.
And that leads us into some new characters and some new adventures.
You mentioned new characters there. We've got a
Eso, a lo mejor es la siguiente moda de YouTube. Voy a reaccionar a un vídeo viral y luego reacciono a mi vídeo donde reacciono a un vídeo viral.
A little bit about how she's the preeminent warlord of chaos and the leader of the Varangard, Archaon's right-hand woman. She grew up in the fighting.
El nuevo meta de YouTube, sí. Descubrió cómo funciona el algoritmo.
Kind of a sub-realm where chaos rules. It's Archaon's seat of power. And she was born there, she grew up there, and she has had a very bloody history from day one, from being an infant really, all the way up to her current incarnation. She's had to strive to overcome all the chaos tyrants and...
No, esto es Age of Sigmar, la secuela de Fantasy, por así decirlo. Enseñarán cosas de Fantasy, de Underworlds, probablemente. Hay rumores de que enanos, me voy a cagar en la puta madre porque voy a comprar enanos también. Toma, alguien hizo lo del Ant. Guapísimo. No sé quién ha sido, pero enorme. Se me hace un Ant en el chat. Guapo. Apoyando el canal ahí a tope. Quedan 5 horas, tío, para que acabe. Te agradece. Alguien me invita para hablar sobre mi vídeo. Quiero que alguien me invite para hablar sobre el vídeo de Marathon, tío. Eso estaría guay. O sea, de Fantasy... Bueno, Imperio. Compraría Imperio también. De Fantasy solo voy a hacer Bretonia, enanos, orcos e Imperio. Nada más. Porque es que si no ya se me va la olla. Me molaría meterme en hombres lagarto, hombres lagarto, hombres vampiro, iba a decir. Hombres lagarto, condes vampiro y tal. Pero es que ya es demasiado. Ya 4 ejércitos de Fantasy ya es demasiado. Warhammer como tal no existe, es una marca. Esto es Warhammer Age of Sigmar, Warhammer Fantasy... Bueno, a ver, Warhammer Fantasy se llama Warhammer clásicamente, pero Warhammer Fantasy es un nombre por el cual lo conocen coloquialmente. Hoy en día es Warhammer Old World, el Warhammer Fantasy de antes. Y luego existe Warhammer 40k y todos los subjuegos. Warhammer Necromunda, Warhammer Kill Team, Warhammer su puta madre. Hombre vampiro y conde lagarto. Sí. Loco, deja de hablar ya de puto Dawnbringers, me cago en Dios. Quedan 20 minutos de evento, supongo. Calla, que estaba en el Carrefour el otro día, había una cantidad de Lego Star Wars que hasta me tentó llevarme una caja, pero luego dije, ¿para qué? Pero es que son bonitos los sets, tío.
Thank you very much for joining me, Phil. No problem. And for everybody at home, there's some more fantastic reveals coming.
Now we are cooking. Another set of absolutely awesome releases and some really insightful stuff from the studios on what's to come too. Very exciting stuff.
What's to come.
Now, time for a little teaser and another reveal.
Veamos, el teaser. Teaser. Dune, ¿van a sacar Warhammer Dune también? ¡Hasta la polla! Uy, ¿eso era AdMech? ¿Qué coño es esto? Uy. El Mechanicum para 30k.
But I'm pretty sure I could put 2 and 2 together based on what we've just seen. Or maybe that should be 1 and 0 because it's binary.
Indeed, there were some fantastic clues there, including one
Mierda.
big red one.
Yeah, and of course, if you reckon you know what it is yourself, why not join us on social media and tell us what you reckon it is?
Head over
Me
to
estoy conteniendo
Warhammer
mucho con
for all the
30k. Podría
details,
comprar muchas
and
cosas de
don't go
30k, pero
anywhere,
no lo
some
estoy haciendo.
fantastic reveals coming.
Eso tenía pinta de Mechanicum. ¡Enanos de Underworld! Me cago en Dios, mi cartera sangra. Mi tiempo libre no existe. Grudges will be settled. Ah, míralos. Puto bonitos, cabrones. ¿Sacarán también el kit de batalla paso calavera? ¿Enanos monopose? ¡Ay, enanos, tío! ¡Ay! ¡Qué monos que son! Bugmans. ¿Esto es Warhammer o demás son gilipolleces? ¡Míralos! Muchos hostigadores ahí. Maravilloso. ¿Enseñar la cajita? ¿O solo presentan que va a haber enanos, que es algo que se sabía?
So, we've just seen a fantastic video showing off some beautiful models.
Me pregunto si seguirán el camino de Bretonia y Kemri o el camino de orcos.
Thank you guys for joining
Me
Tell us
gustaría más que
more
siguieran el
about
camino de
the
orcos.
Dwarven Mountain Holds and how they play.
So what we've seen is a whole bunch of classic miniatures that are going to be coming back to the range. I know a lot of Warhammer players are very excited to see some of these miniatures come back.
Me encantaría tener enanos multipose, porque tengo muchísimos enanos, pero son monopose todos. Yo tengo uno por aquí, por alguna parte en la mesa. ¿Dónde cojones está? Lo he dejado aquí. Ahí está. Tengo uno monopose de estos de la batalla Paso Calavera. Enseñar lo mismo. Esto es de la batalla Paso Calavera, que esta mini la pinté por 2006 o así, cuando salió esa caja. Que son monísimos, tío. La pintura súper básica de su época, cuando apenas estaba empezando en ese mundillo. De estos tengo una barbaridad, tío. Incluso los monopose, los enanos quedaban bien en monopose, tío. Estaban chulos. Pero siempre quise tener enanos multipose porque quedan más guay. Será esa nieve falsa. A ver, es Games Workshop, tienen dinero. O sea, yo llegaba a tener nieve falsa para peanas y tal. Pero no tengo dinero para
Because we've seen some of them in the Forces of Fantasy.
So we've got the classic bolt thrower and grudge throwers returning. Any
último RTS, ¿cuál?
dwarf worth their salt will be happy to see those returning. Then we've got some of the newfangled things. We've got cannons and organ guns returning as well. So even those younger, more sort of
Nada, tenía un paquetito, lo compré en Andorra, curiosamente. Tenía un paquetito de nieve de escenografía. Quedaba súper bien. Pero con las décadas se cae completamente por mucho que la pegues. Quedaba muy bien, tío. O sea, echabas esa mierda de las peanas de los lobos espaciales. Qué cosa más bonita. Es que como no se refiere al Realms of Ruin, no sé a cuál se refiere. No sé si salió otro, creo que no. Realms of Ruin lo tengo resubido entero. Exclamación directos en el chat. Podéis ver, iba a decir la serie, pero es un único vídeo donde tengo toda la campaña subida. Nada más salió el juego, me lo streamé entero de golpe. Oh, ¿esto podría ser la caja? ¿Podría ser la caja? Arcabuceros, 2 de guerreros, ¿no? Una de ballesteros y 2 girocópteros. Me la compraría. Si vale lo mismo que la de orcos. Eso parecía la nueva caja.
Yes, we do have the return of the Bugman's cart.
So obviously one of the things we saw was a beautiful army shot at the end there with everything ready to go. How would you go about starting a Dwarven Mountain Holds force? You know, what would you bring together as your core, and what might you add to that
espérate, ¿hablarán de la
So the
cajita?
backbone, the core of any dwarf army is the warriors and the missile troops, be that handguns or quarrelers. Dwarves traditionally fight in shield walls,
Qué bien
finding great
pintada está la
weapons and
piel,
shields
joder.
interlocked together, supported by dwarves
Qué bien lo
carrying
hacen.
crossbows and handguns, and all of this supported with lots of artillery from very traditional dwarf.
With artillery,
artillery
with
pieces like
artillery.
the bolt throwers, the grudge
Mira el
throwers,
tatuaje,
more
tío.
modern
Está pintado
war
bien hasta el
machines
puto
such as
tatuaje.
cannons and flame cannons, and less honourable war machines such as the Goblin Hewer. All of this capped off and supported by airborne cavalry in the form of gyrocopters and gyrobombers.
Son muy diferentes. Total War probablemente sea mejor juego, pero son muy, muy distintos. Es que son géneros casi opuestos de RTS.
Dwarf Warrior box. How flexible is that? Because I
Ah,
remember
mírate el vídeo, está resubido entero, así puedes ver las primeras impresiones, ves un poco de gameplay.
Oh, it's a very flexible.
Creo que tengo un review también, en realidad. ¿Hice review? Creo que hice review.
To build dwarf warriors with hand weapons and shields, dwarf warriors with great weapons. The alternative kit, the missile troops, allows you to build them with dwarf handguns or crossbows. So again, very, very diverse kits that can be used to make warriors in different types. Also
Esta última toma me recordaba, no, me da la impresión de que podía ser la caja de 100 euros.
So these are the dual kits that are returning, the hammerers and longbeards, and the iron breakers and iron drakes.
Yeah, these are the kits that represent the more elite parts of your army, the hammerers being the Thanes and the King's personal bodyguard, the Longbeards being the older, more seasoned dwarfs who grumble their way through a battle but are not very afraid of anything. The solid backbone of the army, the dwarfs who the young beardlings look to for leadership and inspiration.
You know, when protecting a king, we can't not mention that gorgeous new miniature. We've got a king on 3 dwarf warriors on a big old shield being carried around. What's it like working with that kit?
The new Dwarf King with shield bearers, it's a stunning kit. Allows you to make a Dwarf King with shield bearers and an alternate Dwarf King or Thane on foot. The astute watchers will have noticed that the shield is now borne aloft by 3 dwarfs, not 2, making it a far more large and impressive kit that takes up the space of 4 models within a unit. And
Orcos de 40k, porque si lo pones con K, son de 40k.
Ranked up amongst the hammerers, amongst their personal
Orcos de Fantasy ya han presentado. De hecho, hoy hice la reserva de un par de cajas. Deberían salir unas cuantas semanas, creo.
A Thane on foot with a great weapon, or vice versa. You can change the components up and
Octacus, Cazaderín. Vamos a tener un problema tú y yo. Vete con tus Tau.
Several hundred years before the reign of Karl Franz. Are there any returning characters we might expect? As dwarves are quite a long-lived race, so I can imagine there might be some people or names that we can recognise that are still alive, now and later on.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, dwarfs are quite long-lived. So there's definitely going to be a few names that people will recognise from the old days of Warhammer Fantasy Battle. One character who I believe we saw there in the video was Ungrim Ironfist, and in our time period, he is the king of the Slayerhold, and what we get to look at now is a younger, more active dwarf, and he's not the only one. There's going to be a couple of other characters whose names will definitely be recognised.
Warhammer sea de 40k, de Fantasy, incluso de Age of Sigmar a estas alturas.
Brilliant older models coming back, and a couple of glimpses at some fantastic new ones. Thank you very much for showing us everything.
Vamos a hablar de la caja.
Dan, Jonathan, thank you for joining us.
Our pleasure.
For those of you watching at home, there's some more fantastic reveals coming up, so don't go anywhere.
Welcome back. Enjoying yourself?
Bienvenido, Espalda.
Don't forget, you can let us know which releases you're most excited about by hitting us up on any of our socials. And you can remind yourself of all the releases you've seen after the show over on the Warhammer community website too. I know, you've seen enough of me and I promised some more 40k action, didn't I? Well, let's dive back in with some more announcements and maybe even another little teaser too.
Vete la mierda, tío. Los teasers. Kill Team. Kill Team. ¿Cómo no? Vale, tenemos GSC contra... Bueno, contra enanos hemos visto, ¿no? Otra vez el puto kit del Brute este, ¿cómo se llame? ¿Cuántas veces lo han sacado ya? Esos enanos están chulos. Están guay. Están chulos los enanos. Venga, ahora 10 minutos hablando de Kill Team.
The new Kill Team battle box is on its way. It's called Termination, and we've got Tom and Elliot from the Warhammer studio to tell us all about it. Welcome to the show, guys. Thanks for joining us. So, first of all, let's have
a ver cuándo cojones nos metemos a Kill Team, tío. Tenemos mucho tiempo hablando de que vamos a meternos a Kill Team.
So you could say Beta Decimers had a bit of a tough time.
Hemos echado hasta una partida introductoria. Tiene buena pinta el juego, tiene pinta que es muy divertido.
Orbital defense platforms and military bases and the capital city and things like that. And so the Jaegers are part of a larger fleet that is actually shadowing a Tyranid hive fleet. And they have been following this Tyranid hive fleet as it's been absorbing the biomatter of planet after planet. So they're allowing it to fatten up, filled with delicious advanced biomaterials and things like that. So they're waiting for the perfect time to ambush this hive fleet in a giant space battle. And so the Jaegers have been sent out in a scouting ship to see where they're going and to make sure that there's a whole area of space where the Leagues of Voting get to work without being interrupted by anybody else. Unfortunately, they fly close to Beta Decima that seems to have gone through some tough times.
What?
And they are engaged by Genestealer-controlled orbital defense weapons that manage to take them by surprise and shoot their ship down.
Hostia, el Rogue Trader. Debería jugarlo algún día. Tengo que instalarlo en Steam Deck, seguro que va bien.
Massively outnumbered by the Genestealer cult. So the Genestealer cult deployed
Ya creo que no seguiré la serie porque no había mucho view interesado en verla.
So in terms of the,
Ese del centro, el gilipollas tío calvo.
I've only seen them as the pioneers riding around on their cool Maxi-coiled bikes, right? What are the Hunkin Jaegers and how do they actually play in kilting?
So they're a brand new unit for the Leagues of Votan. Like you said before, the Hunkin we've seen are the pioneers, who are the ones on the bikes. These are the Jaegers. So they're still part of the Hunkin, but they have a slightly different role. Now the Hunkin's primary role is the scouts. They're the advanced party of the Leagues of Votan, if you like. So they range ahead of the rest of the fleet and the rest of the forces. They will identify locations of importance and drop markers or beacons or relay the information back to the rest of their kin. But sometimes they'll need to leave a presence there. And that's where the Jaegers come in. So the Jaegers are an incredibly self-sufficient commando unit, if you like. And they'll get deployed at
Lanzamisiles mola
locations that
muchísimo.
are identified by the Hunkin. And then they'll conduct acts of sabotage, assassination, disruption for extended periods on their own with very little support or reinforcement. So when the rest of their kin arrive, they're effectively mopping up all the great work that all the Jaegers have done, whilst they take it easy back on the ship, I suppose. But yeah, they're really, really self-sufficient and conduct sort of guerrilla warfare type battles. That's their purpose. In the game, they have a lot of unique rules. So sort of a hybrid between extremely elite and more of the more numerous teams that sort of sit in the middle. One of the first things they do is they like to control the board. So they've set up their traps and their
Mecánicas no puedo decir gran cosa porque no
entiendo
a fondo las mecánicas de Kill Team.
First of all, you can set them up further into the kill zone and get that early board space and make that yours. They also have a load of mines you can litter around the battlefield so that you're really forcing your opponent to move specifically or otherwise take the damage from those mines, which is fun. And then they also have something quite unique called resourceful points. Because they're very, very self-sufficient and flexible and adaptable, if you like. They can generate these points that you can then spend them to either heal some wounds if you start to lose some wounds, but you can also add one to their APL to do more actions, that kind of thing.
That's always nasty.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's really, really useful, and especially because it's reactive, so I can keep these points and then spend it the moment I need to, which is unlike a lot of other APL rules where you normally have to set it up and it's a bit more telegraphed. This is a little more reactive, which is quite nice.
Nice.
They've also got some.
Llevan 47 minutos y no presentaron. Bueno, presentaron Outworld, supongo. Pero muy poco en realidad. Tiene pinta que van a cerrar con una OS4. Pero va a ser cortito el anuncio.
It gives this operative a real
Prefiero casi esto que hacer rollo BlizzCon, ¿sabes? Que la BlizzCon ocurre una vez al año, hay que esperar un montón, vale, te presentan muchas cosas y mucho detalle, pero es una vez al año. Esto ocurre más a menudo, pero es una horita así más light, más chill. Pero sí que parece que cada 2 por 3 tenemos un evento de Warhammer, macho.
very start the turning point, get some shots in before anyone else, which is really, really fun. So you've got a Magna Coil rifle from your sniper. And so overall,
Justo he estado pensando en el Warhammer de Star Wars, bueno, en Armada en concreto. Quiero estar una partida algún día.
And force you to go specific ways, and then fighting a real guerrilla play style. So as long as they're controlling the narrative and they're in control of the game, that's when they're going to shine the best. So yeah, they're a really, really fun team.
So onto the Brood Brothers themselves. Now they're quite a sub-faction of the Genestealer cults themselves. For those who don't know about it, would you like to explain more about what the Brood Brothers are?
Yeah, so the Brood Brothers are Astra Militarum Imperial Guard that have been, brought onto the side of the Genestealer cult. They are normally waiting in hiding within loyalist regiments. They can sometimes be, we've talked about in the background of this book, where they can sometimes be the most effective squad of an Imperial Guard platoon, for example, and the commander loves them until the day of revolution happens, and then they turn on their sort of loyalist.
Como foro de guardia imperial, esto me da mucho asco.
This particular Brood Brother squad that we want to capture here is the most elite version of a Brood Brothers. They are veteran guardsmen who have fought in many campaigns, who have either been Gene Stealers all along and been in hiding, or they've been turned.
Cadianos veteranos, tío, pero infectados por tiránidos.
They use lots of special weapons that the Imperial Guard use and things like that, and they are the bodyguard squad for the Brood Coven. So they
no duraréis ni un día en la KGB, te lo juro.
Of the Gene Stealer cult
no comparte ni un rasgo facial, hermano.
Yeah, well, speaking of which, shall we deal with the
Estáis ciegos todos en cuanto a caras.
The Patriarch, that's going to be in the Brood Brothers kill team, is it? That's a terrifying notion. I'm kind of morbidly interested, yet really intimidated to find out more about it.
They're the scariest operative for sure. So yeah, we've had a lot of fun.
En la caja vendrá la escenografía también. No sé si son reactores, no sé qué coño es eso.
If you want to take them, so effectively you're going to have a choice each game whether to take the Patriarch or one of the other ones, which
sabes lo que
double
es la
activation.
sífilis, no lo que usábamos en WoW hace un momento.
They can even mind control the opponent's operatives, which is to make them do actions, which is just really, really cool. So it's a lot of fun, a real
Lo que me jode este kit, macho, que el puto jefazo tiranio es el mismo de siempre. Que hasta yo tengo un par, creo.
The Primus, who's the tactical mastermind of the Gene Stealer cults.
Que veis un hombre blanco y todos son iguales por vosotros, Qué racismo. Pero es que la cara no es la barba casi todo el mundo la tiene igual. Tenéis que fijaros en la estructura ósea, sobre todo, si queréis diferenciar una persona de otra.
Extra CP, influence over initiative, which is really important, and they're also a good fighter to boot as well. But between those three operatives, you've actually got quite a lot of flexibility on how you want to play them, depending on what your opponent's playing, that kind of thing. And like Tom was saying before, they're also an elite veteran guardsman squad, effectively. So if you don't want to play with one of the Brood Coven and you just want to take extra operatives, they're more than worth doing as well, because they have lots of really funky interaction rules between them.
Ese tiene cara más de William Riker de Star Trek.
On what you want for that game.
So what exactly do we have in the box then?
So in the box, you get these two new pieces of terrain. All the other terrain here is from the Killzone Beta Decima stuff that you can get separately. Then you've got both of the teams. There's quite a lot of models in here because we've added the Brood Coven as well. So in terms of models, it's one of the sort of heftiest model amounts that you get in a kill team box. You also then get card packs for each of the teams with data cards, with equipment cards, all the sort of stuff you've seen in Salvation for the scouts and the scorpions. And then also a book with all of your
missions, para poder meterme bien a todo esto, tío, necesito montar yo la oficina de abajo. Porque es que ahora no tengo espacio para organizarlo bien. Está todo guardado en sitios caóticos, muy desorganizado. Es súper incómodo. Es que tiene pinta que... Bueno, no sé si vendrá todo en la caja, porque es bastante grandote.
In this box.
Well, that is Kill Team Termination. Thanks again for joining us, Tom and Elliot, and letting us know all about it. Sounds super cool. Can't wait for it. Keep your eyes out. It's coming soon. But
¿Se viene OS4 ya o qué?
Even more stuff on its way, so stick around.
Pégate alrededor. Stick around. ¿Eso qué son? ¿Son Drukhari? ¿O Eldars? Qué chula esta transición. No sé si es CGI o miniatura. Necromunda. Nos falta Necromunda aún. Bueno, solo un teaser según lo que veo. Eso parece algo eldartástico.
So that was our second teaser trailer. It looks like we're heading back to Necromunda. What do you think, Sonny?
It does indeed, yeah. Necromunda's a big place, of course, so it could be set anywhere. Who knows? Indeed. Who knows? And, of course, some shiny new miniatures by the look of it as well. If you reckon you know the answers to these questions, folks, make sure you join us on social media and let us know what you think.
And for more information, head to warhammercommunity.com.
I cannot believe it. Even more fantastic announcements, and even that teaser I promised as well. Who knew? Well, I reckon that's about it. Oh, I almost forgot. There is just one more thing to show you.
Van a estar 7 minutos como mucho, tío, con AOS4, en serio. Ven, al menos el tráiler tocho. Sí que se han inspirado en la estética de Dawnbringers, sí. Sigmar mintió. Ese era el teaser. Han hecho un CGI completo para OS4, bien hecho. Contra Zench.
Sigmar told us we were chosen.
Hostia, el puto Nagash, tú. Oh.
To be reforged as his weapons.
Eso ha sido bastante canon. Sigmar robándole almas a Nagash. Muy feo por parte de Sigmar. Oh, mis Nighthound, tío, en CGI. Qué bonitos. Mis Cruel Boys en CGI. Si supiera algo del lore de Age of Sigmar ahora estaría hypeado. Ciudades de Sigmar, maravilloso. Que debajo de la tierra me salen escabencitos. Eso parece muy energía, muy campana de Skaven, ¡Ratas! Vaya. ¿No será que en Warhammer siempre se filtra todo antes de salir? Espero que no estén demasiado sobrecargados los cabencitos nuevos, tío. Que lo que molaba las ratas es que eran un montón de ratas plebs. Y mandabas a la batalla. Una rata ogro maravillosa. Mira esos Stormcast, son los de Realms of Ruin. Parece que se ven el revamp en general los Stormcast antiguos. Están primarizados. La Rattling Gun. Este cogió bien el consejo de Thanos, tío, de haber apuntado la cabeza.
Sigmar lied. He never told us the true cost of this honor. Soon, all that will remain of me is an echo, lost to the storm. But until that day, I fight.
¿Dónde están mis minis? Puto Age of Sigmar 4, ¿quién lo habría dicho que aguantaría tanto este juego? Porque cuando salió no tuvo mucho amor del público, que digamos. ¿En el 16 salió Sigmar 1? Creo. Este veranito, Dios, no me lo pongáis la misma fecha que el Resurrection Fest, solo os pido eso, por favor.
Yes, it's official. Warhammer Age of Sigmar's new edition is here and is coming very, very soon. I'm joined by Ben.
Por favor, que no sea a finales de junio, tío. Que me lo veo venir.
To chat about
Ya me pasó con 40k décimo.
Guys, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
First of all, let's jump straight in with that cinematic. I mean, come on, that thing is absolutely amazing. We were blown away by that. Let's talk about some of your top highlights from the cinematic trailer.
I mean, it was gobsmacking. The first time we saw it, we were like, what? It's just absolute tour de force. We've been working with these characters and these different factions for a while, but seeing them brought to life in that way, it just pitch perfect. Really,
I love that they've worked so hard on that as well. You can tell that they're really bringing those sort of like miniatures to life. That bit where the Skaven comes sort of like rolling down that hill with the rattling gun is just absolutely amazing as well. So obviously this event is sort of huge in the cinematic trailer that we've just seen, but obviously it's just a small glimpse into the threat that the Mortal Realms are facing right now. So let's talk a little bit about the lore and sort of where we find ourselves in the narrative of Age of Sigmar. So whereabouts are we now?
Ya está bien. Es más insomnio que yo últimamente.
So we've just come out of the era of the beast, very destruction focused. Chaos strikes
Duerme.
back.
Tienes que aguantar muchas décadas más, Nos quedan muchos rezos por delante.
Vermin doom. That was the big explosion with all the stuff rising out of the ground. That's an entire nation of Skaven. It's not just a small area. Has gate crashed the party. A full third of the Great Parch is now completely destroyed and replaced by Blight City, the Skaven otherworld. And they are pouring out of there in their billions. So the
El tío de la derecha me
Stormcast
recuerda a mi
mates
instructor
better
de
shore
mi
up those
profesor de
gaps
prácticas de
pretty quickly,
autoescuela.
'cause that tide is coming and it's not stopping anytime soon.
Nice. So you chatted a little bit about the
Jo,
Skaven
no.
sort of how
¿Por qué
the
ponéis jo en
mortal
vez de
realms
o?
have sort of been reforged and stuff. So let's chat a little bit about the
Oh,
Skaven.
no.
What makes them so much more
Suena muy a
dangerous and
francés,
so
tío,
much
no me
more
gusta.
sort of horrifying in this new edition?
Well, we've seen the Skaven before. They're old friends, aren't
Yeah,
they?
yeah,
I mean,
of
we've all grown up with Skaven in a way.
Yo que quería
And
agarrar el
so
Skaven a
Warhammer,
Cedric de Age of
what
Sigmar,
we're seeing
tío.
now is not just a few of
La
them
que voy
creeping
regalando
around in the
Nurgle.
sewers, but a real tidal wave of these things. And the horror of the
Duermo todo
Skaven
junto.
really
Ya
is
veo.
coming
Te has
through,
ido a
as
dormir
well
hace
as
2
humor,
horas, te has
'cause of
despertado en
course there are
2.
a few beats
Si
of
es que
them
has ido a
running
dormir
away, getting
siquiera.
speared, and
Yeah.
their giant rattling blaster form, you know.
Claw Lord.
The Claw Lord just
Having a
bailing.
little
No,
go. No, that's not
Not
bad.
having any of it, he's
Getting
gone.
out there
There's
really
still that
sometime.
sense of humour to the Skaven, and they're kind of slightly charming
Sigmar
cowardice.
minis.
But
Guarro.
we are also seeing the Skaven on their best day, which is pretty terrifying, with all the weird Frankensteinian monsters and technology and.
A veces no duermes todo junto, si te has despertado medias. Porque me cuesta dormirme, me despierto un montón y a veces me despierto en 2 horas y ya no me duermo.
Yeah, totally. And we can't talk
Eso es un
about
problema.
the Skaven without mentioning the Stormcast Eternals, obviously. So let's chat a little bit about the Hallowed Knights and the Ruination Chamber as well. Tell us about that.
Sigmar hit the big button, didn't he, and opened another chamber. You know, the Ruination Chamber, these guys, as we saw in the main character in the trailer, been reforged so many times. They're starting to lose that little bit of themselves, losing that thing that made them human, and they're turning into incredible warriors that can go into some of those really awful places in the mortal realm. So we saw that, didn't we? The regular Stormcaster there, and there's bits of.
Ah, me gustó el trocito de Nagas, tío.
The guys from the Ruination Chamber, in they go. We are the guys to do that.
Yeah,
That's almost the benefit they get from.
Se ha muerto alguien, por fin tengo almas. Puto Sigmar.
You know, it might seem like a blessing to be these big, strong heroes and they've got all the kit, but really they're dying over and over again. That's not a good thing, and they're paying the price.
Oh, that was really one of my favorite things from the trailer. I think it's the first time we've.
No, era
really
justo
been
lo que
able to
dijeron las
show that
filtraciones.
so clearly,
Nada nuevo realmente.
You know, both the blessing of immortality, but as Phil said, the curse of the immortality, and the kind of character that we see throughout the trailer, seeing that journey, both of, you know, becoming more veteran and becoming more elite and a stronger warrior, but then, you know, losing that.
Hoy técnicamente empezó la primavera, me cago en mi puta vida. ¿Cuándo cambiaban la hora?
Near the end of
Era
that
este fin de lo siguiente, ¿no?
becoming kind of so jaded, so you know, having seen so many horrors and lived through so many horrors and so many deaths, that these are kind of some of the only people that can venture into
Nos van a robar una
this
hora, tío.
absolute horror that's emerged across the mortal realms.
Let's chat a little bit about rules then as well. So what can players
No, a veces
expect to
sorprenden. La
experience
10ª
with this
edición de
new edition
40k me
of Sigmar?
sorprendió.
This will be the
Hace un
biggest
año.
shift in rules since
Fue en
the
Adepticon
introduction of
también,
Age of
¿no?
Sigmar. This is the first
Dios,
ground
me parece
up
tan
rewrite
lejano en
of the
realidad.
rule
Me
set,
parece que pasó
for Age of Sigmar
épocas.
since the very first
Y aún no
edition
monté
came
esa
out.
caja.
You know, we really had 3 major goals in mind.
La
when we
hora
were doing
buena,
that.
la hora del diablo.
The first was
La
opening up the
25ª
game
hora,
to more
la hora
players
oscura.
than ever. You know, really trying to make sure that the game was easy to learn, easy for new players to get into.
A ver. Hablando de
yet
mecánicas, ya.
retaining the tactical depth that makes it really difficult to master, where you could spend, you know, years and years
Hora y
playing
media.
and gaining that skill and that skill.
Hora y media y un
expression.
minuto.
The second thing was building on the interactivity in 3rd edition, with more reactive commands and more opportunities for counterplay in your opponent's turn.
Que sigue habiendo mucha crítica a que puede ocurrir el turno doble. ¿Turno doble? El turno doble en AOS, claro.
Closely fought battles where every game can be exciting and tense. And, you know, this is such a big shift for the rules, such a big update that not only have we done a major update to all the core rules, but also every faction will be getting brand new rules for this edition.
Wow, okay, yeah.
So there's lots and lots of exciting things to look forward to coming up soon.
Yeah. So you guys were obviously heavily involved in the development of the new edition. One thing that I really, really want to know is what got yourselves and some of the playtesters most excited about this new edition?
There's a lot to chew over.
Yeah.
So the bit for me that I really love, I think it's a small change but it has huge impacts, is combat range. So weapon ranges have gone away. So for melee,
hay rango?
everything now runs off combat range, so a 3-inch range, and that works for things like claiming objectives, how
Hostias,
characters can
han
interact
quitado
with
el
different
rango de
units,
las armas.
benefits can be applied,
A
and
melee.
also in combat, and it just makes that combat phase so much slicker, so much quicker to play.
Ahora todos son 3 pulgadas, según lo que he escuchado.
For me, I think you touched on it there. Is that
No pensaba que eso fuera un problema de Age of Sigmar en realidad. De hecho, le daba un poco de identidad.
Story on the battlefield and seeing, having those games which you talk about 10 years later, and having the rules almost get out of the way to be able to do that. And the way we've made these rules is they're so accessible and easy to use. We'll come to that in a minute. That it just is far easier to see the ebb and flow of the battle and to do cool stuff on the battlefield. It's really good fun.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's really been kind of learning from all of the editions in the past. Through that work of making it more accessible, what we're really doing is trying to make it more elegant as a rule set, and looking for opportunities.
Pero escribieron muchas reglas de
to
Age of
really
Sigmar
merge down
aparentemente.
without losing any of that tactical depth and any of that skill.
Stormbringer
expression that
está
comes with it.
empezando solo con reglas ya desactualizadas.
That comes through in these war scrolls and on the battlefield.
I think you've said before, Matt, as well, we've got almost a decade's worth of knowledge now and,
Yeah.
and,
No,
and,
Teos,
and
no.
feedback
No
from
le hagas
players
caso.
all over the world to be able to put into that.
Well, and just our own lived experiences, the amount of the games that we've played, and we all love the game and love the system. So this is really a culmination of that, and I couldn't be more excited to get it into players' hands.
That's great. So let's talk Spearhead as well, because this is a brand new way for players to play.
Van a meter
Age of
Combat
Sigmar.
Patrol al
Talk to us
final.
about that. What tell us everything about Spearhead that we need to know.
Gosh, everything. So Spearhead, it comes in the launch box. So everything you need to play Spearhead, the models, the board, the terrain, the cards, the rules for every faction as well are all included in the box. So you can play it
Incluso el terreno.
on day one.
As you said, a brand new way to play the game. It's a small format game. It
Básicamente
uses,
metieron las reglas de
a lot
Combat
of brand
Patrol
new
a Age of
mechanics
Sigmar.
people haven't seen before.
Mecánicas
Really
totalmente
compelling
nuevas.
card mechanics for
La caja
tactics
nueva
and
tendrá básicamente dos
and
Spearheads de
it's
estas.
just, a really, really exciting, really fast and furious, and very balanced way to play the game.
Claro, querían reequilibrar el juego para que funcione con estas nuevas cajas.
The amount of games that are played, because you can play it in an hour, play it at lunchtime really easily.
But there's still all that tactical depth. It really feels like
Partidas
you're
de
still
una
playing
hora.
a big war game. You're playing Warhammer, but it's a lot easier to do. And each of the spearheads
¿Jugáis
has been
partidas de
really well
Warhammer con
balanced
ropa?
against the other.
Pero depende
Even if it
contra
looks
quién.
like you might have
Con
the
Cydric.
advantage. So Indrasta spearhead, Indrasta being
Con Morgana.
a very powerful champion of Sigmar and her elite Stormcast Eternals. The real punch of that spearhead doesn't show up till halfway through the game. That gives a kind of inbuilt narrative to the game. So you've got this scenario where your normal Stormcaster trying to hold the line and hold back the enemy, and then pow, straight halfway through the battle, in comes Indrasta and her Annihilators to swing it back. So there's like an inbuilt story to that. There are choices you can make, so you can still give your guys different command traits or artifacts. You can give your army different ways to fight. And of course, the board is double-sided, so you've got Akshi side on one side, if you want to fight in Akshi, fire and passion. On the other side is Gairan, which is much more lush
Es curioso, la
vegetation,
caja
healing,
base incluirá
and the
tapete,
cycle of
terreno
life. And the
y
cards
dos
that you pick
Spearheads
up
de
every
estas.
turn will give you different objectives. Go there, kill that.
Y tendrá un poco de juego narrativo dentro de esos enfrentamientos más cortitos.
Large amount of ramifications of games you can play with Spearhead.
It must be so great for sort of experienced players to be able to get games in really
No
quick.
suena mal.
So players that might be new to kind of AOS being able to pick that up, and also great for like the tournament scene as well. If you can play X amount of games in a certain amount of time, that must be great.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. Early on in the development of Spearhead, we brought in a group of kind of veteran playtesters. It ended up turning into effectively a tournament over the weekend where they all got really, really into it and really competitive. And so this is something that we've seen really resonate with players and people get a lot of excitement for.
I think what's been fun from like an experienced player is picking up any spearhead, and just because there's so few rules around their battle traits and there's so few war scrolls involved that you can just pick it up and play a game and not feel like you're missing out on anything. So there's quite a lot of times when we go into the playtest room to play a game, we go, what are we going to play with? You know, I've not played with the Glimpse Like Gits for a while, so you take those off the shelf and you can have a game. And again, it's still around about an hour, even with something that you've not played for a while.
You're just working your way through them. Yeah, that's great. Let's chat a little bit about faction packs as well, because I know you mentioned this earlier.
Nada de estudiar reglas, ¿sabes? En plan, coges un ejército y echas una partida.
Update and rebalance and rewrite all of the units for the armies in Age of Sigmar. So let's chat about that a little bit.
Because there's such kind of sweeping changes throughout the rule set, it was really the perfect opportunity to go back and revisit factions. We had some playtest games early on and some conversations early on where, you know, it was a big kind of learning point for us that, you know, the game could never be, would never be less complex than the most complex faction, because you might either be playing with that faction or against that faction. And so,
Eso
you know,
te
a
falta.
lot of that same approach to
Eso pasa mucho en
streamlining and
40K.
really
No,
trying
no
to
ven al menos
focus in
décima hora
on
de
the
juego.
most
Bueno, muy
impactful
poco.
rules, the most characterful rules, but removing a lot of the other detail that maybe you had to manage before. So a really good example is the reintroduction of a limited set of universal special rules. So things like champions or standard bearers, musicians, you know, some weapon abilities. You know, now instead of needing a full rule on each war scroll to explain how this works, you can just say champion and everyone knows how that works.
Están aplicando mucho el diseño décima de
Really
40K
clean, really
a
easy to do.
OS4.
So it makes each war scroll much faster to read, much easier to use. Every single war scroll fits on a single-sided card with all of the information, kind of no matter how big the character, how powerful the character.
We've also done quite a lot of work on stats and characteristics as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So an awful lot of time spent in our playtest room lining models up, putting them in categories. How many wounds should this unit of cavalry have? How many wounds should this one have? So that it makes a lot more sense visually when you just look at the battlefield and you can see, well, what sort of armor save, what sort of movement should this unit have, what health should this unit have. So it's all a lot more consistent now.
I think one of my favourite parts of that is that the colour coding system, we're quite visual. We like to look at the battlefield and look at our war scrolls and our books, and each ability has a colour to go with it to tell you what phase you use that ability in. So you're not having to go through all of your rules all the time. You just
We've all played that game.
Están convirtiendo esto en décima edición de 40K. Está bien.
And that's just really easy way to pass the rules and to know what you can do at certain times.
We've really tried to look from a lore perspective, from a miniatures perspective, from a rules perspective. One of our main tenets of the game is that the rules
Están rodeando el tío del medio con patas, si te fijas.
And so we think the game works best when all three of those things are working in concert.
Como que le ponen el culo más cerca en realidad.
To players. And so this is really the first time we've been able to go back and really differentiate the different races, the different units, the different factions, and give
Pueden tirar
them
un pedo en
much more of an
estéreo.
identity
Voy a callarme.
through the characteristics.
So these war scrolls, they'll be free to access on launch, right?
Yeah, that's right. So there's digital versions of them available at launch, and there's also card versions of them as well, so you can have them laid out in gaming table.
Also, we've got
Bien,
updated rules
descarga
for
gratis
all of
para
the
los
armies
war
of
scrolls.
renown, regiments of renown, you know, content
Bueno,
from the
asumí que son
Dawnbringers
gratis.
series that you've been playing through, all updated for the new edition.
Everybody gets something new and cool to look through.
No enseñaron ni
Hopefully
una
it
sola
will
miniatura
inspire
aún.
you to telling
Con la
great
tontería
stories
llevan
on the
20 minutos
battlefield
hablando, no 7.
and having a lot of games of Age of Sigmar. So yeah, hope you will enjoy it.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, Ben, Phil, Matt, thank you so much for joining us and coming into the studio to chat a little bit about Age of Sigmar. We cannot wait for it.
No worries.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Dime que van
Well,
a
that's
enseñar
all
algo.
we've got time for.
No me
What a
jodas,
show
tío.
and what a series of announcements. Thank you to Adepticon for having
No,
us.
tío.
Thank you to you for being with us. We hope you've enjoyed it just as much as we have.
No.
Remember, you can head to the Warhammer community website if you'd like to find out more about any of the
Quiero
upcoming
saber más,
releases.
sí, o sea-
Don't forget to follow us on all our socials to keep up to date with all the latest news. Thanks again, and we'll see you
No
next
puedes
time.
presentar
on
una
Warhammer
edición de
Preview
juego nuevo sin enseñar una puta miniatura, tío. Quiero saber la caja. Quiero... Loco, vete a la mierda. Pero, hermano, o sea... Pero, a ver, voy a Warhammer Community, ahora se han posteado algo. Pero, ¿por qué no han enseñado ni una miniatura? O sea, se han pasado 20 minutos enseñando miniaturas de puto underworlds. Me ha ido... Es raro que no han enseñado nada. Si sale este verano, tiene que tener todo preparado ya. Un carajo aún aquí. Loco. ¿Dónde, ¿sabes? Estoy cabriated. ¿Dónde coño están mis reveals de miniaturas, tío? Quería ver al menos un Skaven. ¿No como las minis las enseñaron en septiembre? Si sacaron la edición en junio. No enseño las minis después de sacarlas, No funciona así. Pero me cago en Dios. El lado bueno. No, quiero ser pesimista hoy. Déjame. No, Dios, que sale este verano. Cállate. Cállate. ¿Cómo que salga en junio? Verás, han dicho verano 2024, no han dicho nada más. Puede ser junio. Probablemente será junio. Ojalá sea julio, por Dios. Así me tomo mi descansito entre festivales, me pongo a pintar gilipolleces, hacemos todos los vídeos de... Uno de los vídeos más vistos del canal, por no decir más visto, es de cómo jugar Age of Sigmar 3. voy a hacer por cojones como jugar Age of Sigmar 4, tío. A mucha gente le ha servido ese vídeo. Me cago en Dios. Joder, tío. Pero en serio, ¿dónde están mis ratas? No, las ratas no serán mías, las ratas serán, mira. Mira. Lanza con español ya y todo. Ojito. No. Punta y lanza, nueva forma de jugar. ¿Ahora qué? A ver. No, coño, esto es para apuntarte a la newsletter para que te manden noticias como tengan. No, sí, o sea, lo de Spearhead, a ver, en general, todos los cambios que han presentado son lógicos. De hecho, estos son las cajas de Spearhead, tal cual, ¿no? Ahí se pueden ver, básicamente. Lo de Spearhead era una cosa que, honestamente, viene muy bien. Sí, lo de quitar el rango melee es súper peculiar, la verdad. Es muy peculiar. A ver, hemos jugado poco Age of Sigmar. Nunca vi como un problema, la verdad, lo del tema de que hubiera que calcular distancias para todo. Pero bueno, agiliza el juego, eso suele ser bueno. Entonces no lo simplifica demasiado. Pero Spearhead en particular, tío... Bueno, no solo Spearhead, han hablado muchísimo, ¿no? De temas de que van a poner más palabras clave, rollo 40k décima, van a entrar más en esta palabra clave significa tal para reglas genéricas, así que no va a haber demasiada regla específica en cada facción que rompa la regla genérica. Ya. La pregunta mía es qué pasa con el doble turno, eso lo hemos comentado, porque, claro, han dicho que quieren que el juego sea un poco más reactivo, que haya más cosas que hacer en el turno enemigo. No he jugado aún 30k, tengo entendido que en 30k hay bastante mierda de reacción en el turno enemigo. Quizás beban un poquito de allí. No lo he jugado, no puedo comentar en detalle. Estas cajas no son básicamente las cajas de vanguardia. Porque esta, en esencia, es la caja que le regalé a Sidric. Las 2 moscas, el gilipollas del pergamino, los 10 estos y los 5 estos. ¿Es un placeholder o simplemente las renombran y van a usarlas con estas reglas nuevas? La Stormcast, que yo sepa, es la misma también, que es como una versión recortada de la caja de tercera edición, solo que con el carro. Tío, esto me viene muy bien, porque esto podrá ser una manera muy accesible de empezar a jugar partidas más casuales de Age of Sigmar, que es algo que queremos hacer. Y si a raíz de eso entramos a Age of Sigmar más serio, bienvenido será. Porque con la tontería, de aquí ya tenemos acceso ahora mismo a 1, 2, 3, 4 cajas. Y con bastante facilidad podríamos montar al menos 1, 2, 3, 4 cajas más. Y con eso podríamos hacer informes de batalla interesantes, tío. Me gusta en general, me gusta lo que he escuchado. Me da mucha pena no haber visto nada de miniaturas nuevas de Skaven. Ni siquiera los de Stormcast, pero los Stormcast ya se... Todos los rumores, o sea, sí, se cumplen todos los rumores, efectivamente. Todos los rumores en cuanto a diseño físico de miniaturas apuntaban que, y el trailer CGI también lo cumple, apuntaban que lo que van a hacer sobre todo para los Stormcast es no tanto sacar unidades nuevas, porque en 3 ediciones realmente los Stormcast, porque en cada puta edición los Stormcast tenían 400.000 unidades nuevas. Hay facciones que tienen muchas menos unidades que los Stormcast, como pasa con los Marines en 40k también. En vez de meter muchas más unidades nuevas de Stormcast, lo que iban a hacer es un revamp visual de miniaturas que ya teníamos que serían interutilizables, ¿no? Puedes usar tu Liberator de primera edición o puedes usar tu Liberator de cuarta edición que será más esbelto y más bonito. ¿Qué pasa? A mí los Liberators de primera edición no me disgustan, son suficientemente monos, tío. Yo compré la caja base para poder hacer los vídeos, pero no creo que sustituya mis Stormcast clásicos por los Stormcast nuevos, porque ¿para qué? ¿Sabes? O sea, tengo una barbaridad de Stormcast que honestamente solo he utilizado en las series rollo Mortal Realms y Stormbringer. Nunca no, los he usado en 2 partidas separadas de... Creo que luché contra ellos más que con ellos, no me acuerdo. De Age of Sigmar, primera edición cuando salió en el 16, creo recordar. Y usarlos en un entorno más interesante, pues joder, la verdad es que me apetece. Ni un solo anuncio de miniatura, tío. Han enseñado más enanos de Fantasy que ya habíamos visto en su época la mayoría que de Age of Sigmar. Pero bueno, esto fue la Adepticon. El formato en general me parece más agradable que lo que tuvimos los años pasados. Es un poquito más profesional. Así que bien por ellos, tío. Y ahora lo siguiente va a ser el evento de mayo, ¿no? ¿Cómo se llama el evento de mayo? Creo que el siguiente evento que nos toca es el de mayo. Voy a bajar un poco el volumen. Pero bien, estoy relativamente contento. ¿Mereció la pena quedarte despierto? ¿Es la pregunta? Supongo que sí, es la respuesta. Lo resumiré este stream, supongo, al canal de Warhammer. Y bueno, pronto cuando salgan noticias hablaremos de las noticias en vídeos concretos y en noticiasgamer.com. Que tenemos nuestro apartadito de Warhammer también. Chicos, voy a jugar un par de partidas más a esto.